All right, here we go. Welcome to Smart Water Wednesdays. Thank you for joining us this morning. I have the honor and pleasure of being joined today by one of the best water managers I know, Joe Jackson from Sprinkler Supply, who is not only a great friend of mine, but who is at the forefront of the water management conversation, not only in his market, but because his market is so big and having such a great effect, he is part of the national conversation. So thank you for making time, Joe.
Hey, you bet. Thank you. And quick shout out, you got my picture there. It's I'm with Peter Carlson. I want to just say thanks to Peter Carlson real quick. He is one of my good friends at Hydro Point that has been there since the beginning. Chief Technology Officer right now, if I'm not mistaken.
And co-founder.
And co-founder, yes. And he and I have had many a conversation on how we can be better and do better when it comes to water management. So I think that was the perfect picture for you to put up there today, Ben.
Oh, thanks. So let's just start this conversation off. Let me give you a little bit of backstory on what we want to do today. Some guys get together around a dinner table and talk about sports or the stock market. When Joe and Brady and Charles and I sit around the table, this is literally what we talk about. We are water nerds right down to the core. And so this is a conversation that started between Joe and I, and we wanted to kind of roll that out. We wanted to include more water managers and have more voices in this conversation. And what the conversation we want to focus on is what makes a good water manager. Joe, what led you to this topic?
So as I've been working in the industry and in our market here, one thing that has always been kind of a rough pill to swallow was that the people that are having the most impact on consumption, that are putting down the most water, are the least trained, they're least recognized, and yet they have the most impact on conservation. So that person that's programming the controller, or that field tech that's making the repair, or your irrigation manager, right, that is maybe programming the controller. The role of water manager, and we'll talk more about this, is an emerging role that is becoming more and more important as more attention is being placed on water, as we have higher population growth, as we have more restrictions put into place, because in Utah we have a terrible, terrible water winter. Hardly any snow in the mountains. Reservoirs are looking bleak. It's just not a good year. And so I'm excited to see what the conversation turns towards and how we can recognize these water managers and give them the tools to help with this conservation effort.
Yeah, and I think to your point, many people don't recognize that as much as 50% of a city's water supply is managed by the irrigation managers in the city, yeah. Right? So we are spending enormous amounts of water and money on this precious resource that is largely unchecked. And we see an emerging trend, not only in the private sector, where we see it with contractors, especially in the more progressive water markets, but inside organizations like the ones that you work with that are designating a role called water manager. And that's really what we wanted to explore today, right?
That's right. Yep. And then within our company, we started our water management division years ago, specifically because of what you just said. We recognized that there was a need, and we were able to help with that need. And it's not just about selling product. It's about supporting our contractors, supporting our customers, supporting the design process, and sharing our knowledge through training and through on-site support to help these individuals recognize the role that they play and help them with the tools that they need to be effective managers.
And one of the things that we talked about is what this looked like even just a few years ago, right? And one of the things that you said to me was, you know, if we had had this conversation a few years ago, what would the answer to what makes a good water manager would be wildly different.
It would. So we talked about this 5, maybe 7 years ago at the most. if someone said, someone started talking about a water manager, let's say within a city, I would be thinking utilities. I'd be thinking waterworks. I'd be thinking water coming into my house. And as far as water manager, that role has completely changed. Today, we're seeing customers that have a dedicated, like you said, a dedicated water manager, and their job is to manage controllers, manage consumption, manage programming, manage alerts, right? They get a break, let's fix that break because you can waste so much water. Simple little things like that. That this role, that is specifically what they're doing. And we have, you and I talked about this leading up to it, Ben. I mean, what are some of the people that traditionally have filled that role that make up a good water manager?
Which brings me to my first slide. Are you ready for this?
I am ready. Let's see it.
Okay. I have like 3 slides and they all look like this. It's more like chapter slides, but we wanted to encourage participation on this conversation, not only in the chat and Q&A box, but going forward. If we want to hear from you, we want to know, what are you a water manager and what is your role and how do you see yourself as a water manager? And what did you want to say about that, Joe?
So when I see that, it makes me think about that comedian that says you might be a water manager, right?
Could be a water manager.
You might be a water manager if you're making repairs in the field. You might be a water manager, right? If you are programming a controller, you might be a water manager. If you are doing an irrigation design or installation, you might be a water manager.
Right. And I think it goes so far beyond that, though, right? What we really want to explore today is the wide spectrum of folks who qualify under this title, right? When we talk about water managers, I see in California, where they do have some of the most stringent and progressive allocation sort of water restrictions, we see landscape maintenance companies hiring one person to exclusively be their water manager, to have this laser focus. And I can think of a couple of examples inside your market of organizations that are doing the same thing, right?
That's right. So I think we need to talk real quick about the motivation for that, Ben.
Okay.
Why is it that we're seeing this emerging role? What is causing these maintenance companies and these universities and schools and contractors to create a water manager role? What is driving
that? And I think that there's a number of answers to that question, right? I think first, success breeds success. So when we tell the story of water management and the success that you're having, and when you were talking earlier in the show about the billions of gallons that you're helping to manage and helping your customers responsibly use a year, that is something that catches people's eye, right? You really do speak loudly when you say billions of gallons of Utah water.
Yep, I would agree with that. I think just that, I think more attention on water being used. I think water shaming is, as funny as I think that is, I think social media has helped people want to conserve more. I think the rising cost of water. You have some organizations, they're like, we love our landscape, but we need to find a better way to manage our water if we want to keep the same landscape. I think that's been a driving force behind it too. And I think one of the biggest tools that has helped water management grow is WeatherTrack. I'll just put that out there. Having the tools. These tools didn't exist 10 years ago like they do today. And so how can you effectively manage water if you don't have the tools to do it? And I think those are some of the things I've seen in my market that has been driving this movement.
And I would only add on to that Mother Nature has also made it an imperative. Like, I think that we took for granted so long the access to water as something that we just automatically would always have. And through drought and through scarcity and through Mother Nature stepping in, we are beginning to realize that that's not necessarily a given. That is something that we need to closely watch and closely manage. And there's value there to hold ourselves accountable for that kind of usage.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
All right, so let's move on. I have another slide to take us to the next chapter.
Let's see it.
The next chapter we're going to call, what does a water manager do? So this is where Joe and I argue a bunch. This is where the conversation gets a little heated. And so what we've kind of structured here is looking at all of these different roles about kind of the traditional definitions of water management and who these water managers are and what is their field role. How are they water managers? So Joe, if you would start us off by talking about your bread and butter, the irrigation technician.
So yeah, there's so many layers to this. So it sounds like Ben's going to riff off of it. So there's so many layers to this. So I look at the ultimate goal of conserving water, and conservation doesn't need to have a negative connotation to it. It's not negative. It's just doing better with what we have. Sometimes you hear eliminating waste. Exactly. Doing better with what we have. So if we think about just very basic, we think about a field technician. That field technician, simple things like adjusting sprinkler heads. Are they level? Are they raised high enough? Are they broken? If you don't have an efficient irrigation system, which is 100% on your field technicians, if you do not have an efficient irrigation system, you are going to use more water. So we can start as basic as the field technician and the work they do on a site. How efficient is that irrigation system? And along with that, how well maintained? Are their nozzles plugged? Are their pipes broken? Are their nozzles missing? And so I would start the conversation with that individual, field technician. I would say that he is a water manager.
Yeah, and I just anecdotally, I think it's funny to think about how many of those folks recognize themselves as water managers, right? How many of those people really understand the impact that their daily routine, straightening heads, changing nozzles, actually has on water consumption.
You know, what'd be cool, Ben, is if we put together just a little one sheet that showed these individuals the duties that typically they have and how much potential savings, how many gallons those little bits would do, because I think you're spot on. I don't think that they have any idea on how much their work, if they have an efficient operating irrigation system, how much that saves in water. I really don't think they see that. I think that they're so busy going from repair to repair that for them, it's not even something that crosses their mind.
Yeah, I agree. And that really brings us into the next big role of irrigation manager, and that is that of the person who manages the schedule, right? There's two big ways we waste water, one by broken irrigation systems, the other by inefficient scheduling.
And they play off each other. They work hand in hand, right? Like this, because what is the culture of our industry? If I'm walking a site and I see that there's a dry spot, what am I going to do?
Crank it up,
right? Turn it to 11, right? Yeah, I'm going to turn it up. And I don't fault any individual. I think it's just the culture and what is normal, right?
And it was 100% what I was taught. Like that was what I was taught coming up. Hey, we just need to add more minutes here, add more minutes there, add more, like that was part of the site walk.
That's right. And now what we do is we turn that on. We turn on that system and we see why is it dry? We look at a schedule. We look at how much water has been used on that. Have there been any associated alerts? Is the solenoid good? Do we have any other wiring problems that may be preventing that zone from coming on? Or is it simply that some kids walked by and they took the head and they turned it to water the sidewalk instead of the grass? So that's something that definitely is a change that we are seeing in the industry.
Yeah, and Charles has a great point that I have to break in with.
Yes.
Charles says, in many areas, climate change is likely to increase water demand while shrinking water supplies. This is shifting the balance, and that would challenge water managers to simultaneously meet the needs of growing communities, sensitive ecosystems, farmers, ranchers, energy producers, and manufacturers.
And you all just got a sneak peek into our dinner conversations.
There you go. That's how we roll.
That's Charles. That is awesome. And that is so true. That is true.
Right.
And that's a balance, right? Charles called it. It's a fine balance because I was working with some city people the other last week, and we were talking about the phone calls that they get on, hey, why are you guys watering so much? And then turn around, and if not the same person, maybe their neighbor that says, hey, how come the grass isn't green? And it's just that balance of having a usable landscape, but still saving what you can and being responsible with how much water you're putting down.
Absolutely. So that brings us to our next type of water manager. This is where my definition of water manager comes in, right? When I am training, I have my training hat on, right? I call irrigation managers a separate category as water managers. And I define a water manager as somebody who may or may not have their hands on the controller, but actually wants to provide oversight to the water management project, right? So this is in textbook definition, account managers, folks like Chad Sutton, who is on the call right now, who is in charge of overseeing techs, not necessarily the hands on the controller as much anymore, but making sure that we are delivering the outcome that we propose, right? That we promise to our customers.
Yeah, and that is where we talked about that emerging role, where that is something that they focus on, right? And you and I, like you said earlier, we've had some fun conversations on what a water manager is. And I think it's because this is an emerging role. And we are seeing someone like Chad that is dedicated to supporting the process, using his knowledge and experience to support the employees that are in his company to help them achieve the goals of the customer and achieve the goals of the company.
Right. And this is where Joe and I get heated, right? Because in my eyes, a water manager, really the difference between an irrigation manager and a water manager is the conversation when it changes from runtime minutes to gallons, right? That principle that you can't manage what you don't measure. And I think a true water manager is dialed into the gallons, understands innately where those gallons are going, and ideally how he can rein that back in and understand, all of the different strategies of only using what you need and being able to cut that down if necessary.
And I think the reason that we I think we're on the same page. You just might be on the bottom writing the final text of that page. I'm still at the top, where we have in our market, we have more flow sensing adoption. And because we haven't had, and we have a lot of retrofit going on where they put a controller in without a flow sensor, and then use savings to help facilitate that implementation of a flow sensor down the road. So I have to work with customers that don't have that visibility, but they do have a controller that they can manipulate the programming, and they're seeing a reduction in minutes from traditional use, and then they get a water meter reading on consumption, but not that daily visibility or minute by minute visibility, which really helps you understand that usage, right? And I think it's because in my market, the water manager role is still emerging. We have a few companies that are providing water management services. We have a few cities, schools, maintenance contractors that have water manager roles, but we're not as advanced as I know we will be in even a year or two. But I agree, Ben. I agree that would be what a water manager does, is where they actually manage the water that's going down on the landscape. And I'm at the point where they're managing the controllers and everything else. And it's because of a lack of visibility. But I hope to get there. I hope to get to the point where the majority of the people I'm working with do see that, and they have that as a arrow in their quiver to help them accomplish it.
Which transitions to our next type of water manager that we discussed, the designers. And do the designers have a role in this to play?
Designers' impact on conservation is huge. And we have seen a large shift in this. 7, 8 years ago, if you asked me how many systems that were installed had a smart controller and flow sensing, I would say maybe 15%, 10%, not very many. 5 years ago, I'd say that number is probably 30 or 40%. You ask me today, almost every design that comes through our estimating department has a smart controller on it and it has flow sensing. A complete shift. And it's because these designers are understanding that, number one, with a smart controller, they are going to have a more successful implementation and growing period with the landscapes that they design. And they're going to be able to provide their customer with a product that is going to help them continue to manage that site upon turnover from the contractor. And they understand that not only a controller and flow sensing, part of that mainline and irrigation management, but also the types of heads that they're using more efficient spray heads and MP rotators, doing a better job of more efficient design on zones, using drip where necessary and acceptable. All these little things that they're able to bring into play on their irrigation designs that makes it so much more efficient than a lot of these retrofits that we're going to, where grass up to the foundation, rotors at 60% spacing, so you know they're watering twice as long as they need to. I mean, so much different, and it's exciting because they play a role. They play a role in it.
And I think that the key thing for designers is, as in my role, I have a front row seat to see the evolution of this technology, right? You and I have been here since ET Plus, and in that time, it's not just the smart controllers that have emerged as a great conservation method, but the head technology, the nozzle technology, making sure that all of that translates into the field, right? Starts at the design phase. So I agree. In addition, I think that nothing saves more water than a well-designed irrigation system, right?
It does. Yeah. And it's a conversation we have quite often with our customers that are looking at adopting smart controller technology. They say, well, I've got a garbage sprinkler system. I said, okay, and how do you have it programmed? We water all the time. Well, you can put in a smart controller and you can better manage that garbage sprinkler system, and you'll be able to save water because you have better management tools in place. And so that conversation, cart before the horse, what's going on here? I've had some customers like, well, I need to put in a new irrigation system before I can get the most savings out of my smart controller. I'm like, that's true. You will get more savings with a more efficient system, but start saving today by putting in a smart controller and managing those schedules and managing the water that's put out. You can dial it into the efficiency of the landscape. You can dial that in, but then you're putting down the right amount of water at the right time. And with these new irrigation systems, these new designs, irrigation designs that are coming out, it's so much fun to go through and do a site consultation because you know your precip rates, you know your efficiencies. You go through and it's like, this is going to work awesome. And it does.
Yeah. And from a weather track perspective, right, what we're talking about is even if everything is dialed in exactly the way it should be, if you reflect your sprinkler efficiency the way it behaves in the field, a 50% efficiency needs to overwater to get the job done. And as we take steps in proper design and really installation and long-term maintenance, we can eke those efficiency numbers up without changing anything, just changing the hardware in the field to save more water and still get the job done.
And one thing that I'll share with customers, I'm like, with a weather track controller, you're going to have the management tools to help you accomplish your goals, whether that is conservation brown or golf course green.
I call it weather track green.
Yeah, weather track green. Well, weather track green can be different shades.
Yeah, right.
But it's
still green. It's not brown.
No, and it's interesting because I have some customers that are like, it just needs to be alive because we don't want to waste water. I'm like, well, it can be more than that. It can be healthy alive. Not overwatered healthy.
Not emerald.
Not emerald. That's right. But it can still be healthy grass. So,
right. All right. So that we want to move forward. The key dimension that I see the world in when we talk about water managers is the role of sustainability director, right? Somebody involved in a sustainability program, which is kind of where WeatherTrack has its loudest voice because the effect is so amazing. Right, the overlooked waste that is happening in these systems. A sustainability manager who has their finger on the pulse of energy consumption and all of the different metrics of all the different bills, right? Get easy wins with WeatherTrack, because there's so much overwatering going on that by just adding the right technology and the right visibility to this conversation, we're saving millions of gallons on sites, right? Right off the top of my head, the easiest one, the Colorado School of Mines measured 15 million gallons of savings just by trying to get it done.
Yep. And I think the reason you like that role so much, Ben, is because it's metric driven, data driven, which WeatherTrack does a great job of providing data. And if we're looking at checking a box and being able to have a measured return on investment and measured savings, those sustainability managers are going to love it all day long, because it does it. WeatherTrack controllers will deliver on those savings.
See, and that's where my definition, right, where I'm driving at that gallon watch, those are folks who never touch the irrigation system. They only invest in the numbers and the data and push the managers to do right by the project, and in doing so eliminate all that waste, bring that water down to where it needs to be.
Yep.
All right. One thing we didn't talk about, and I know we're running out of time, but the role of water purveyor is a different conversation altogether, right? And I think that water purveyors play a key role as water managers in offering incentives to adopt this technology, to all sorts of stuff. What's your take on that?
So our local conservancy districts have really adopted WeatherTrack and have run with that. We've got some of them that have actually, for incentive programs, they've identified their largest users, and they have given them WeatherTrack controllers to help them with their conservation efforts. They said, here's a tool that you can use to reduce your use. And so that, coupled with incentives where they'll pay up to 50% of the cost of the controller, up to $1,500, has helped with the adoption significantly. And it's really exciting because we're seeing they'll do some monitoring on water bills, and we're seeing 25, 30, 35% average savings after installing WeatherTrack. And this is EC normalized. So
and when you go to return on investment, right? When you talk about that in the market-driven conversation, right? How fast does it pay for itself? In both of our markets, oftentimes 2 years is a pretty good standard, right?
Yeah.
I've seen customers save that in a month.
Me too. Yeah, I have one site that they paid for it in a month. Yeah, it's like, oh, you're using a lot of water.
Well, yeah. Or they're in a tiered rate structure, right? Yeah. In Santa Fe, their top tier is $25 a unit. Just taking them out of the top tier saved them enough.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's great. It's a lot of fun. So now, with all of that said, and one thing we didn't touch on was owners, Joe.
Yeah.
The people who pay the water bill.
Yep.
Definitely drive this conversation and should be recognized as water managers, right? Financing and initiating this conversation is a big part of it.
That's right.
All right, so let's summarize that. So in your eyes, Joe Jackson, what makes a good water manager? More specifically, what would you, if you were trying to encourage the industry to assign a role of water manager, what would be the key things that you would look for on that resume?
Key things I would look for is an individual that's not afraid to embrace technology, that has a good understanding of irrigation and efficiencies, that has field experience, just simply so when they're trying to understand how I can do more on a site, that they know what options are available to them. Either that or have a good team underneath them that can help them with that process. So I would say a good water manager is going to be someone who wants to make a difference, is not afraid to embrace technology, and is willing to recognize their own role and to do something about it.
Like it. Good stuff. So what I now want to throw to the audience is, we did this as an introduction. The reason that we wanted to do this episode, it's less demonstrations and technical nerdiness, but really we talk about this all the time, and we would love to hear what you think. So I know that many of the folks who are watching this are watching it on a recorded version and not on the live broadcast, but at any point, I would love to hear what you think. So please shoot me an email at bcoffee@hydrapoint.com and add to this conversation. It's something that I would love to talk to anybody about, as well as to bring up in another session later on, maybe drill down even further or reignite this conversation. What we're really trying to do is help all of our customers recognize that this is an emerging role. This is something that really does pay dividends. The focus on driving deliverable savings or deliverable outcomes really does pay dividends and is worth the investment in assigning that as a task or a worthy call. All right, Joe.
Okay.
So I'm running out of time here, but I have to ask you, you are a second-time guest. And so I always ask my second-time guests, what is your favorite WeatherTrack feature?
You know, I hate this question, Ben.
I know, because you know them all.
There's so many. So I'm going to say today, my favorite feature is going to be a tool, and that is the mobile app. And the ability to use the site map to identify where my stuff is, where my assets are on my property, because I need to know where things are so I can take care of them. And I'm seeing a lot of adoption of that technology locally, a lot of excitement. And it's interesting because it doesn't have anything to do with my schedule. How long is that station going to run? It has nothing to do with it. But when there's a problem, where is that problem at? And it's going to help me know where all of my assets are, where my I can put heads, my valves, my zones,
where
isolation valves, where the shutoff is, all of that, you know, all those simple little things that we take for granted until that person leaves that knows where everything is.
Yeah, you need that one person and they're not there.
They're not there. So I would say Sitemap and the mobile app, those two tools are something that I'm seeing make a difference in the lives of my water managers and all my WeatherTrack users.
Absolutely. And in my nerdy certified water manager training that I took many years ago, the first thing they teach is make a map, right? Don't waste water looking for where the water's running. Yeah. So that just plays into that conservation, and I love that. I love that answer. So with that, let me give a plug for next week. Next week, I have an exciting guest. We are going to talk about Joe Jackson's favorite feature of the week. We will be talking about mobile mapping.
Cool.
We will be joined by my friend Mike from the Los Angeles County Parks, who is going to talk about his initiative to go through all of the Los Angeles County parks and use that mobile mapping feature to make his teams more efficient by being able to find the components that they're looking for. So we have an exciting week coming up. So please, please, please join us next week. And in the meantime, Joe Jackson, thank you so much. It is always an honor and a pleasure to have a conversation with you. Thanks for making time.
Thank you, Ben. This has been a lot of fun, and look forward to further conversations about water management.
And I will forward you any emails I get. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Sweet.
Thanks, everyone.